I'm back. I'm Russ Rapp, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Previously, I've talked extensively on non-duality, but I'm going to be taking my channel in a wildly different direction. So if you're a previous subscriber and you want to talk more about non-duality, I'm sure that will come up in the future. However, I have hours and hours of previous videos to cover the topic of non-duality. So you can go and check all that out. Really, it's kind of a simple thing anyway, and it doesn't take a lot of time to understand conceptually. If you look at the word non-duality, it means not two. So what does that mean? What's the point of saying that it means not two? Well, essentially, it's pointing to this question of the nature of reality. So what does it mean that reality is not two, it's not divided, it's not separated? That's the question that it brings up. And does it provide a clear and definitive answer? No. But it maybe puts you in a space to ask the right question, to get to a point where it can open you up to other possibilities. And so oftentimes with non-duality, people try to make it something it's not. And so it's kind of like the idea of Plato's cave, where there's images projected onto the cave walls, and people think that's like actually happening. So they're watching, it's kind of a precursor to the idea of movie screens or television. So non-duality essentially is the screen itself that's kind of the glue holding it all together. And so we see the characters and the stories and the images on the screen flicker and change and develop and have experiences over time. And we think that is what we are. And non-duality is kind of the backdrop to all of that. And so when it comes to the topic of non-duality, it's ultimately we're discussing it with words. It's a concept. It's an idea that we're trying to describe. And so what happens is we take that description of reality and try to make it something that it's not. And so oftentimes you'll see people discussing it and talking about how it has changed them, how they've, the ego has fallen away, and now there's this emptiness, this empty fullness. There's no center, there is no me. It's just everything. It's just what is. And so we use all these terminology to try to describe something, but it becomes a thing in and of itself. And then all of the what it's trying to, the essence of non-duality kind of gets forgotten, and you lose the forest for the trees, because it has nothing to do with development or enlightenment, essentially, in the sense that you are now somehow enlightened. Because it's, when we talk in those terms, it becomes all about you and your experience in time. So it's whether someone else has that experience of a no me, of a non-self, and that you are witnessing that and you're trying to become that. And so you're like asking the questions, you're seeking the knowledge, the wisdom of how do I become a non-dual person, if you will. Which is silly in and of itself if you really think about it, but that's the attempt. And so when people see my videos, oftentimes I have comments where maybe I'm not communicating this very well, or not being direct enough, or I'm using too many analogies, which I like analogies, or I ramble, whatever you want to say. And so the message gets lost because the focus is on the messenger, and whether I portray a sense of calmness or peace or equanimity, where it comes across in a way that you can see me as this enlightened guru. And that's not the point, because the people that are speaking clearly about non-duality, even if they're saying it in the most perfect sense, in that communication is a two-way street. And so you're interpreting it as you're hearing this message. So through that interpretation, then you come up with your own ideas of what's being said. And even if the messenger is producing a almost perfect message, you're going to interpret that in whatever way you want to interpret. And so it becomes something of along the lines of, did that person explain it well enough? Are they exemplifying? Is their personal life experience something that's separate and different and special compared to what I'm experiencing? That's what ends up being that game. And when it comes right down to it, has nothing to do with that person or you specifically. And it always becomes something that I'm trying to obtain. It's all about me, and it's all about someone else either not that, or not not saying it everything in the right way, or it comes across as like they're being disingenuous, even if they're being genuine about it. And it's like, if you think about it from a natural perspective, with the idea that somehow human beings can have this experience where now they're non-dual, now they're somehow enlightened. Oftentimes it's kind of one of those things where, okay, if that's the case, and if there is someone, a teacher, a guru, a speaker that has become now enlightened, the assumption is that everyone else that is not that person, or the select few enlightened individuals, are somehow in a lower status, a lower class, if you will. And you can take that to like the animal kingdom. And so are humans the only entities in this world we believe to exist as it is? The what is, this aliveness, are the squirrels, the trees, the everything that's alive in this world that we see with our eyes. Are they doomed to be unenlightened because they don't have the cognitive abilities to have this experience? Or do they just continue to act like animals? They find and hide their acorns, or they grow leaves and flowers. Do they keep doing what they do? And so I think with the human experience, we have this mental structure that is built about how things are supposed to be. And when that kind of falls away or breaks down, then there's this seeming experience of enlightenment, or lightening up your worldview, your experience, and having kind of a different outlook on life. And that's where I think that's what people are trying to achieve, trying to experience. But that's because I think the lie, the separation, the walls, the habits get built up in a human sense, where when that does get challenged, or when it does break apart, then there's this sense that there's somehow now an experience different than before. So there was this tightened, constricted, separate self, and now that's gone. And so then that becomes the goal of non-dual seekers, is to have that experience of, I think it's called like cathexis, or being cathected, to catharsis, to this release, having this enlightened epiphany experience. So that tends to be the goal that people are trying to achieve. And so when they come to non-dual talks, they oftentimes, I guess I can't assume, but if you're coming to learn something or gather something, it's not going to change your life. Like I said, it's the screen that holds all of change, all the experience. It's kind of like the impersonal backdrop of life, the code, the energy fields, whatever you want to call it, that we live our lives within. And the message of non-duality is that we are projected onto that screen, but we are not separate from it. So it's all connected in a sense. And so there's no way to get out of that. There's no way to gain that. Again, there's no way to have a better experience of that. It is what it is, always, at all times. And so how that can be interpreted from let's say a religious perspective of God is, if you ask God for something, you ask God in the moment. It's this idea that God is ever present and always listening, and will hear your prayers. versus like, oftentimes the mind looks into the past for answers or looks into the future to try to figure out where things are headed. And so it's kind of, instead of focusing on the connection in the moment, it goes into all sorts of different areas to try to find that. And it's always here, it's always now. And that's where we get into things like the power of now, where we're trying to understand things from this current moment, being present, being here and now. And that's what ends up happening. So then that becomes the goal of being present, if you will. And yet again, that's another carrot to try to reach. And so the message of non-duality says that even if you don't feel like you're present, or your mind's going everywhere, or you're focused on the past, or you're dwelling on something, or you're habitually obsessing about, something you're scared about, or whatever the experience you're having, you're not disconnected from what is. You're not disconnected in a non-dual perspective. And so there's nothing you can do or say or learn or be, or there's no one you can follow that's going to give you that. It is always there and ever present. And that's kind of the grace of God, another way of putting it. So I've spent some time talking about non-duality. However, this channel is going to be moving in a new direction, like I said at the beginning of the video. But I did find a Bible verse that I thought was good in relation to non-duality as we move on. And like I said, I still will probably bring up non-dual teachings as we go, but it's going to be more of a focus, because I think oftentimes, like I said, people are coming to this message because they're seeking some sort of change, some sort of awakening, evolution, development, spiritual wisdom. That's what people are seeking. And so that's kind of the direction I'm heading. Non-dual is always a part of every conversation. It has everything to do with it. It has nothing to do with it. So in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 18. So 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 18. The verse goes as follows. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. So that's really a clear non-dual Bible verse there, talking about this nature of the unseen, the mystery, the unknown. And so from a non-dual perspective, that mystery, that unknown, that unseen is always there, is always available. But obviously we can't see it with our five senses. So you just have to assume and have faith that it's there. And with that being said, it's not separate from what is seen, because then it becomes something like, I am a non-person. It becomes this new division of conceptual reality, if you will. So when it comes to the new direction of this channel, I'm really going to be focusing on this idea of awakening. So obviously you'll see from the title, this video is called Russ Rapp Awakening. And so I'll be kind of covering the waterfront of different topics, but I think to get into it, I know with non-duality, telling your story is always frowned upon, because it reinforces this idea of a self, of an ego. But I guess just, we all have our own story, our own path, our own journey through life, and we have our ups and downs. We have our moments of grief and struggle, and then we have our moments of triumph. And I think we're in a very unique time frame that we're moving into, this period of unveiling, apocalyptic kind of experiences, where what you think you knew, or what you think you know, falls away. Your concepts of reality, your worldviews get challenged, and it can be potentially a struggle for you in those moments. And so I'm just going to give you a rundown of, even though we're at 15 minutes, I was hoping to keep this short. So the rundown of my awakening, and hopefully that helps maybe give you a sense that maybe the things that you're going through, other people in the world are having similar experiences. So when I was a kid, I felt I don't know. I mean, I think I've had a fairly normal childhood, but I had a lot of. See, this is where I struggle. I don't like talking about myself, but I guess that's that's what we're here for. So I had a fairly normal childhood, but I had a lot of. I think in general, I was a kind of a dreamer. I had my head in the clouds a lot. But I think, really things for me didn't really start to change a whole lot, because I think a lot of times your younger years are kind of your developmental years where you're growing your belief systems and your habits and your who you surround yourself with and that sort of thing. And then as you get later in life, you kind of question some of those and challenge it. So I feel like I could talk about this for a long time, so I'm trying to bottle it up in a short way so it doesn't get long and rambling. But essentially, I think so I went to college at a liberal arts college, and I guess I wasn't really paying attention to much of anything in the world. I was focused on what college kids tend to focus on, watching pop culture, listening to music, hanging out, the whole social scene and everything. And then never feeling quite like I fit in with anything. I think when I was younger, like I was trying to say is, I felt like I related to everyone, but I never really fit in anywhere specifically. And then I think in September of 2001, with the whole situation at the World Trade Centers, and I guess at the Pentagon, but September 11th was a big, I guess, change for me, in the sense that it really made me question what was going on. What is going on in the world? Like, how could this happen? How could people do this? What does it mean? Like, what's behind it? All the questions that you ask in a time of kind of a traumatic experience. And I think it was traumatizing for, even if people weren't in New York City. And I'd been there the month before on vacation with my family. And that was weird to have just been there and hadn't even really noticed. I remember probably seeing on the ferry tour, seeing the World Trade Center, because we have a picture of it, but those buildings, the towers, but I didn't think much of it. Went to Total Request Live, MTV, and stood out there and had that kind of odd experience of watching other people cheer, because we were on the street level and watching Carson Daly, and it was Anne Hathaway, I think, was there, doing an interview, and it was, I don't know where that video is, but I know I think we saw it afterwards, and the shots that they had of the crowd where I was standing, everyone else was like looking up and cheering, and I was kind of just looking around. I did cheer as well, but it's just kind of an odd experience, because people aren't standing around cheering the whole time and having just a blast. They're literally just standing there waiting until they get the cue from the producers or the camera guys to start cheering, because they know the camera's on them, they're going to be on TV, the red light pops on. And so when you kind of step behind the stage, you get behind the curtain, you see some of the way things are produced. It's kind of a odd experience to see like how what we're seeing is maybe not exactly or even close to what the reality is. But so we were there the month before doing that, and then the towers were attacked and blown up, and it was one of those situations where it's kind of like a come to Jesus moment of trying to figure out what is going on. And so I was very distracted at that point, but then I had a professor named Sheila for our small group communication class, because I was a communication major, learning about how people communicate, how they talk. And she introduced me to the Enneagram, which is often used for personality typology, and also authors, speakers like David Icke and Stuart Wilde, and some kind of wild stuff, literally, that just kind of opens you up to things that maybe you've never thought about, never considered, things that are so strange that you start to question, what's real? Is this all a bunch of BS, or what's the truth of the matter? And so then that was quite a process. And then later on, I'm going to make this way quick. I'm sure I can make a really long video someday if I really want to get into it. But I think when I got into, so then I got married, had kids and stuff, and it was one of those things where I think I met with Sheila and had coffee at one point, and she introduced me to like A Course in Miracles, Tony Parsons, and I think she went to one of his talks, and so she talked about, I don't think we even discussed the term non-duality, but it's essentially kind of what it gets to. So then I started getting into that, and I think this is where it gets to the point where you're wondering, okay, well, why are you talking about awakening? What makes you qualified to speak on this topic? And really, I think we're all in a process of awakening. So non-duality is kind of more of an eternal concept, whereas awakening is something that happens over a period of time. And I think my natural inclination to want to know the truth, want to find out what's real, and I have some obsessive nature in my personality, and really it's I've spent a lot of time challenging my assumptions and challenging and kind of going within, if you want to call it that, and trying to see what's real and seeing how I react, and really from an observer standpoint, seeing how I relate to the world and kind of analyzing that. So that's kind of been some of my experience, obviously having epiphany type experiences. And I've talked about some of my non-dual experiences of being in high school and standing at my locker and just having this overwhelming sense of peace for no reason, and just knowing that everything was going to be okay, kind of is how, I guess, the thought form that popped in my head. But so it happens out of that. But then a lot of awakening and change and development is a struggle for people, and it often comes with a difficulty, and maybe sometimes people call it like a dark night of the soul, and maybe that's something that happens over a period of time in different stages. And I think the reason why I wanted to make this video ultimately and going forward with more discussion on this topic is because we're at the point where there, in a sense, is like a great awakening taking place, where people are at different stages, if you will, of this transitional period, and it's gonna be wild. It's already been really strange so far, leading up to this point, but it's gonna get weirder for many people. And having gone through a lot of personal struggle as well, of coming to terms with my sense of wanting to know, my reliance on myself, instead of realizing that I can't do it all myself and that I have to rely on God to help me through this and to guide me in life. That's where I think a lot of people in kind of this genre of spirituality, non-duality, tend to lean a certain direction, have certain similar ideas, worldviews, and this may be difficult for everyone involved through the next few years of change and coming to terms. So that's where I hope I can be a resource for some of you who want to, who maybe just need some fresh perspectives or need someone to be able to relate to. I hope I explained the new direction well enough and got enough into my awakening process to really help you understand that we're all in this together and we're all going through things. And if you need support, there's people in your life, there's ways to find it. And for those who have eyes to see and ears to hear, you will hear this message. And for those that don't, you won't hear this message, and that's okay. Maybe I'm not the one to deliver it, because it's not about me, the messenger. It's about the message, and what do you do with that? What do you do with the message when truth splashes cold water in your face? How do you handle that? Do you go like this and continue to ignore it? Because then I think oftentimes the voice gets louder, and if you continue to avoid it, it may show up in ways that you may not appreciate. So I think if I could offer some advice is to listen, to be open to. I think that's helped me throughout the years, is just being open to new ideas, new experiences, and trying to ferret out what's real, what's true. And so I think if you can be open and come from a place of love, then I think you'll have a easier time as we continue through this journey of awakening. So with that being said, I will be posting shorter videos, hopefully more on specific topics. Or maybe they'll be shorter, I don't know. But stay tuned for more, and obviously subscribe to my channel if you have not yet, and we can go through this in this way. So I hope we'll see what happens.